The cicadas had already started their evening chorus when Eli pressed the knob of a pencil to the back of a torn grocery bag and drew the first shaky line, a crooked path that began at the evening mailbox with the faded red flag and wound toward the leaning pecan tree that dropped nuts like hard little secrets every fall. He paused, squinting at the yard that used to be his world then. Added a tiny square for the porch he and his mama had painted blue last summer. The paint still bright in his memory, even though rain and time had scraped it down to tired streaks. He licked his lips, glanced up the street where the heat blurred the edges of the air, and drew an X right where the porch shadow met the cracked steps. Then another X near the crawl space vent, where spiders spun their silver nets. Then a third farther back by the patch of dirt that never grew grass. Not even when Mama said, "Come on, baby, let's water it like we believe it can." The pencil shook in his hand, but he kept going, because if he stopped, the thoughts he'd been trying not to think all day would catch him, and there wasn't nowhere to run from those except forward. Eli was 9, small for his age, brown-skinned with big watchful eyes and a stubborn twist in his mouth, like he'd learned too early not to trust what grown folks promised. His t-shirt hung on him, and his tennis shoes had been loved, thin at the toes, and the strap of the little backpack cutting across his chest had a frayed thread he wound around his finger whenever he got nervous, which today was most of the time. The house on Rosewood Lane looked smaller than he remembered and meaner, the way homes do when laughter moves out. Plywood hugged too, windows like a shush finger, and the front door, where Mama once taped birthday balloons, now sagged on a swollen hinge that made a tired animal sound when the wind pushed it. He wasn't supposed to be here, the caseworker would say as much. And his aunt, who took him in after the funeral, would shake her head and tell him he was tempting bad luck. But Eli didn't believe in luck anymore, not in the kind that fell from the sky anyway. What he believed in was pictures that don't leave your eyes when you try to sleep, whispers you can't unhear, and a map you draw because the ground remembers what people forget. He lifted the bag to the fading light and traced the route again, murmuring to himself in a whisper, only the dusk could hear. Mailbox, pecan tree, porch step, vent, no grass place. And then he folded the paper carefully, like it was something delicate, and put it into his backpack beside the plastic flashlight that clicked too loud, the 2 peppermints from church he'd been saving, and a photograph of him and Mama at the county fair. Her smile, a sunrise that made every shadow stand down. The sound reached him before the bikes did, a low, distant growl like thunder trying to remember itself, and his heart gave a quick, hot kick because he'd never stood this close to real bikers before. He'd seen them on Saturdays rolling down Jefferson, a river of chrome and black leather, faces hidden behind sunglasses and purpose. But this was different. This was an ask you carry in your small hands like a candle and bring to people the world thinks are rough, because you need someone who can be gentle and brave at the same time. Eli moved to the jong curb and waited, the map a warm rectangle against his back. And when the first 2 motorcycles turned onto Rosewood, the light caught their tanks and threw little suns across the street. More followed, not a mob, but a family moving in lines like they knew how to be loud and careful all at once. The lead rider cut his engine and lifted his helmet, brown skin, gray at the beard, eyes that had seen too much and still chose soft. Beside him, a woman swung off her bike in one easy motion, braids tucked into a red bandana, the kind of steady you could build a porch on, and Eli recognized her patch even if he couldn't read all the words. Iron Promise, the club folks in this county whispered about and called a blessing or a problem, depending on whether they'd ever needed a miracle at midnight. "You the one asked us to come, little man?" the bearded rider asked, voice low like Sunday. Eli swallowed, nodding, because the yes was stuck to his ribs. He held out the grocery bag like an offering. "I made a map," he said, the words small and fierce together. The woman took the bag with careful hands and unfolded it, head tilted. The bearded rider leaned in, studied the scrawled lines and wonky X's, then looked past Eli at the house. "This your place?" he asked. "Was," Eli said, and that single word carried a winter in it. Woman crouched, the streetlight warming her face. "What do you want us to find, baby?" Eli bit his lip and looked at the porch, at the crawl space, at the no-grass patch where nothing ever took root, and the truth tried to climb out of him all at once. He made himself say it slow, like Mama taught him to when a thing felt too big. Mama, she wrote things down, she hid them. Said if anything happened, I should bring this to people who don't scare easy. He glanced at their patches again, at the iron wheel wrapped in roots. "I think something's under there." The bearded rider's gaze changed, not harder, not softer, just sharper, like a lens had been focused. And he nodded once, not at the house, but at Eli, like he was saluting the boy's nerve. "Name's Reggie," he said. "This is Maya. We don't scare easy." Behind them, other bikes went quiet, engines ticking as they cooled. Men and women stood with their helmets under their arms, looking not at the house, but at the kid holding a paper bag map like a relic. A neighbor's curtain twitched. Somewhere down the block a dog barked once, and then thought better of it. The street smelled like cut grass and old rain, and the tinge of something sour drifting from under the porch. Eli wrapped the frayed thread tighter around his finger, felt the bite of it, the kind of small hurt that keeps you here. "Mama used to talk to the ground," he said suddenly, words tumbling before he could stop them. "Said the earth keeps secrets, 'cause it's heavy enough to hold them. But she told me not all secrets should stay put." Maya's mouth pressed into a line that was equal parts sorrow and respect. "Your mama was wise," she said. "She scared?" Eli asked, surprising himself. Maya didn't lie. "Probably," she said. "But brave is what you do while you're scared." Reggie lifted the map again. "You put 3 X's," he said. "That what she told you?" Eli nodded. "She said the first 2 keep the wrong people busy. The last one is the reason." The bikers exchanged glances, quiet telling passing between them like a coin. Reggie turned to his crew. "We'll look. No cameras, no noise. We do this careful." He faced Ellie again. "You stay with Maya. If you get tired or scared, you tell her, and we stop. You hear me?" Ellie nodded, feeling something in his chest loosen for the first time in months, the way a door opens when a friend knocks the right way. They crossed the little yard that used to be theirs, the crunch of gravel under boots sounding too loud in the gathering dark. Dusk gathered under the porch like a held breath, and a smear of muddy paw prints skittered along the foundation where raccoons had traveled their own secret highways. At the mailbox X, Reggie knelt and ran his hand over the dirt, then sank a narrow spade silently, lifting careful slices of earth that peeled. Back like pages, he found nothing but bottle caps and a rusted key that didn't match any lock remaining. And he set both in a shallow tray like they might matter later anyway, because sometimes trash turns into truth when you know what you're looking at. At the crawl space vent X, Big Tone, who wore his kindness like other men wear muscle, loosened the screws and lifted. The grate, the stale breath of the underhouse drifting out, cool and damp, he slid a hand light as a prayer along the sill and smiled without joy when it came back dusty, except for one clean streak where something had been dragged. He tilted his head to Reggie and Reggie to Maya. and the triangle of understanding closed around Eli like shelter. The no-grass X waited near the back steps where the ground dipped a little, not enough for a person to see if they weren't looking, exactly enough for a kid who spent afternoons on his belly drawing ants to notice the earth was shaped wrong. Eli's breath came quick there, a rabbit's rhythm, and he tasted metal that wasn't blood. Reggie stood still, hands open at his sides, listening with something other than ears. He had learned long ago that houses talk and yards tell, and that the best thing a man can do is shut up until they finish. Then he nodded to two riders who'd carried in burlap sacks. With tools wrapped in cloth to keep the clink down, they peeled the ground slowly, not digging but unbuttoning, the soil giving way in damp, dark curls that smelled like old leaves and secrets. 6 inches down, the earth changed, denser, then looser. Then, Reggie's spade rang soft against something that wasn't rock. He felt the thrum in the handle run up his arm and set his jaw. Maya reached for Eli's shoulder, and the kid leaned in without looking like he needed to, because sometimes you let yourself be held and sometimes you just happen to fit against the person who's steady. Either way, it saves you. Big Tone brushed aside the last layer with a painter's care and found plastic thick, cloudy, wrapped tight, its edges stained the color of old. He slid his knife along a seam and let the dirt fall away from corners made by hands. Reggie lifted the bundle and set it on the tray, nodding to Maya to take Eli farther back while he peeled the plastic as if it were skin he didn't want to cut. Inside was a metal box pitted with rust, the kind a woman keeps letters in, because steel won't betray you like phones do. The latch had been taped shut once and then cut, retaped and cut again, like someone kept deciding whether to remember or forget. Reggie eased it open. The smell that rose wasn't death, it was time paper, perfume oil, a whisper of old rain, and under that, fear that had turned into ink. Letters bound with blue thread, photographs under wax paper, a locket with a dent like it had tried to take a blow meant for a woman's chest. Reggie kept his face still as he lifted the first letter. The neat handwriting, starting with a name he knew belonged to a man folks in this town. Called Captain like he was a ship that kept them safe. He didn't read it out loud, just let the words fly across his eyes and land inside the place where decisions get made. He slid a photo. Partway out, a picture of Eli's mother laughing at the fair with a man who turned his face half, just so, on his forearm, easy to see if you're the kind of person who looks for patterns. A tattoo, a compass with the north point worn lighter than the rest, like it had been inked in a hurry before a shift change. Reggie glanced at Maya. She inhaled once, a quiet, sharp sound. You make when a memory steps from the shadow into the circle of the fire. Across the street, a pickup eased to the corner and idled. The driver lit a cigarette that traced a tiny orange star in the blue hour, then killed it and rolled away when Reggie looked up too fast for coincidence. Eli tugged the thread on his backpack strap until it bit his skin enough to anchor him. That truck, he whispered, chin lifting toward the corner that now held nothing but soft air. He used to sit there. Mama would close the curtain and turn the radio up. The words bent and then hardened. In the space between them, Maya pressed the locket into Eli's palm, warm from her hand now, and the boy closed his fingers around it like it might break if he didn't hold it just right. We'll come back tomorrow with lights, Reggie said softly. The kind of soft you use when you are speaking to a house and a child at the same time. We ain't finished hearing what this yard has to say. He slid the letters back, shut the tin, rewrapped the plastic with a care that honored the hands that wrapped it first, then rose and looked at the porch, at the vent, at the place where grass refused to grow. Your mama did good, he told Eli, truth plain in his voice. She left a map because she knew someday somebody would have the nerve to follow it. Eli's eyes were wet but steady. We're following it, he said, and in his voice there was the kind of faith that makes men build bridges and break chains. Reggie nodded. Yes, we are. And as night settled over, Rosewood Lane like a warning and a promise, the bikers packed their tours without hurry, their engines lighting one by one like stars, and the boy with the hand-drawn map stood in the yard, where he used to chase lightning bugs, and understood, with the clarity only children and soldiers get, that some truths sleep shallow and some sleep deep, but all of them wake when you call them by their name. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, clouds hanging low enough to touch the tips of the pecan trees, the air smelling like rain that had changed its mind but still wanted to be remembered. Reggie sat on the curb outside the Iron Promise garage, sipping bitter coffee from a dented thermos, watching the sunrise turn slow and uncertain over the rooftops. The map, from the boy, lay spread across the hood of his bike, weighed down by a wrench and a lighter, its pencil lines faint, now but still sure of themselves. Maya stepped out from the garage, hair tied, back, jacket zipped halfway, the look on her face that quiet mix of readiness and doubt that came before doing something that might matter. He's still sleeping, she said, meaning Eli, who'd fallen asleep on the old couch in the back room the night before, exhaustion and nightmares fighting until they both lost. Reggie nodded without looking up. He dreamed? Maya leaned against the bike. He called for her, twice. Then just quiet. The sound of boots on gravel came from behind them. Big Tone and a few others emerged, helmets tucked under their arms, the morning's weight reflected in the way they moved. We going back? Tone asked, though they all knew the answer. Reggie folded the map carefully, slid it into his jacket pocket. We started it, he said. We finish it. By the time they reached Rosewood Lane, the day had settled into a dull light, the kind that flattened everything into the same color, like the world was trying to hide its bruises. The house stood waiting, still, the kind of still that felt less like peace and more like patience. Eli stood between Maya and Reggie, holding his backpack straps tight against his chest. His eyes kept darting toward the no-grass patch, then to the street corner where the truck had idled the night before. It was empty now, but the feeling it left behind lingered like smoke. You ready, little man? Reggie asked. Eli nodded, though his throat moved like he'd swallowed a stone. They crossed the yard again, tools wrapped in cloth, to keep the noise low, eyes scanning every window and shadow. Reggie split the crew, two watching the street, two at the side of the house, the rest with him. They worked without speaking, hands moving with the kind of focus that comes when people sense that something beneath their feet is waiting to be known. The first hole from yesterday was half filled with rainwater. Reggie knelt and dipped his fingers into it. It was cold, cleaner than it should have been, like something underground was breathing. Same spot? Tone asked. Reggie shook his head. We missed something. He unrolled the map and looked again, tracing the crooked line from mailbox to porch to vent to no-grass patch. Then he noticed what he hadn't before. A faint smudge near the back edge, not an X but a curve, like a loop that circled back toward the porch. She drew more than one path, he murmured. A route. Maya crouched beside him. You'd think she was hiding it or guiding it. Reggie looked toward Eli, who had started picking at the dirt with a stick, maybe both. They followed the loop around to where the porch's shadow fell longest, even in the weak sun. The ground there was harder, packed down, like something heavy had sat there a long time ago. Reggie drove the spade in, and the sound that came back wasn't the soft sigh of dirt. It was a thud, hollow and deliberate. He froze. Tone, he said quietly. The big man dropped to one knee, pressing his ear close to the ground. Something's boxed, he said. Wood, maybe. Maya's gaze flicked to Eli, who was watching them with wide, unblinking eyes. Step back, baby, she said softly. But Eli didn't move. That's where she stood when she talked to the ground, he said. I remember. She said it was safer there. Reggie swallowed hard, then nodded to Tone. Slow, he said. They dug carefully, inch by inch, the sound of shovels muffled by damp earth. Each scoop released the smell of wrought and iron, of time holding its breath. Then, beneath the surface, wood appeared. Old, warped, the color of coffee left too long on a burner. The box was small, maybe the length of Reggie's arm, sealed with a metal clasp, nearly eaten through by rust. He brushed the dirt away with his glove and sat back on his heels. You sure, kid? He asked. Eli's voice was barely a whisper. Mama said the truth. Don't stay buried forever. Reggie nodded once, slipped his knife under the latch, and pried it open. The hinges creaked, the sound thin and wet. Inside was a layer of plastic, then fabric, then paper. Maya leaned closer, her hand covering Eli's eyes, though he peeked through his fingers anyway. Reggie peeled back the layers until he saw it. A small red shoe, the kind toddlers wear when they're just learning to run, its laces tied in a neat bow. Beside it lay a ribbon, once white, now stained the color of old rust. He felt the world tilt slightly, the air thicken. Maya's breath hitched. Lord, have mercy, she whispered. Eli trembled, his voice cracking. That's hers. Reggie looked at him, confused. Whose son? Eli swallowed, tears streaking through the dirt on his cheeks. My sister. The silence that followed felt alive, pressing against their eardrums. Reggie closed the box gently, his hands shaking. You got a sister, Eli? The boy nodded slowly. Had. Maya pulled him close, her own eyes wet. Reggie stood, scanning the yard, the house, the empty street. We're not alone out here, he said. He could feel it. Eyes on them, maybe from behind a curtain, maybe from the woods beyond the fence. Tone followed his gaze, hand drifting toward the crowbar hanging from his belt. What now? He asked. Reggie exhaled. Now we take this to someone who listened. But the truth of it hung between them. He didn't know anyone who would, not in this town, not when the last woman who tried had ended up in the ground. They packed the box carefully, wrapping it the way they'd found it, and carried it to the bikes. As they were strapping it down, a sound split the quiet, a car door slamming, sharp and close. They turned. The truck was back, idling at the curb, engine growling low. Through the cracked window they saw him, the man with the tattoo, the compass on his forearm pointing north. He smiled, small and wrong, then lifted a finger to his lips and drove off slow, taillights bleeding red down the street. Maya's voice was steady but low. He's warning us. Reggie watched the truck disappear. No, he said. He's scared. He looked at the house one more time, at the ground that refused to grow anything, and felt something deeper than anger start to build, a kind of promise that had weight. He turned to Eli. You did good, little man, he said. Your mama wanted the world to know. We'll make sure it does. Eli wiped his face with his sleeve. You promise? Reggie met his gaze, steady as thunder. We're called the Iron Promise for a reason. They rode away as the first drops of rain began to fall, each one hitting the road like a clock tick, counting down to whatever waited ahead. The rain didn't stop them, it followed, steady and cold, a curtain of gray that blurred the edges of the road as the bikers cut through town like a river made of engines and purpose. Reggie led, His jacket soaked through, water streaming from his helmet. But he didn't slow. Behind him, Maya rolled with Eli, wrapped in her jacket. The boy pressed tight against her back, eyes wide-eyed. The blur of lights and thunder that surrounded him. The box was strapped to Big Tone's bike, double-wrapped and lashed down with care. The kind of care you give something that isn't just evidence, but the last breath of a truth someone died to tell. The ride took them out past the city limits, into the industrial stretch where warehouses slumped under the weight of rust and memory. Reggie turned down a narrow lane toward a storage unit that looked abandoned from the outside, but wasn't. It was their fallback spot, the one place they used when they needed to talk without eyes or ears nearby. He cut the engine, the others following one by one, and the sudden silence was louder than the storm. Water dripped from their jackets as they wheeled the bikes under the tin awning. Maya helped Eli down and guided him toward the small space lit by a single flickering bulb. Inside were folding chairs, a dented table, and the smell of oil and damp wood. Big Tone set the box on the table, its metal edges still wet. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Reggie said, "Lock the door." Tone did. The sound of the latch sliding home echoed. Maya took off her gloves, wrung them out, then looked at Reggie. "That man today, the one in the truck, you saw his arm?" Reggie nodded. "Same tattoo, compass, north worn thin." "Police?" Tone asked. "Worse," Reggie said. "Ex-police. The kind that doesn't stop working just because somebody told him to." He turned to Eli. "That him? The one you remember?" Eli's voice was small but steady. "He used to come late. Mama said he was helping her. Then she started locking the door." The bikers traded looks, anger stirring low and slow in their chests. Maya crouched beside the boy. "You remember what your mama said about the map?" He nodded. "She said if I got scared, I should find people who keep their word." Maya smiled faintly. "You found the right ones." Reggie opened the box again, his fingers careful, reverent almost. He laid out the contents on a clean rag, letters, photos, the little shoe and ribbon, and a folded sheet of paper that had stuck to the bottom. He peeled it loose, unfolding it slowly. The paper was lined, torn from a notebook, the ink smudged but still legible. It wasn't a letter, it was a list. Dates, initials, places, and next to each, a number. Maya leaned in. "That's not a grocery list." Reggie shook his head. "No. Looks like a ledger." Tone frowned. "For what?" Reggie traced a finger down the column. "Kids." The word hit the room like a door slam. Maya's hand went to her mouth. "Dear God." Reggie kept reading, voice flat now, holding steady so it wouldn't break. Names, ages, notes, moved, missing, unaccounted for. "This ain't no random thing. This is her record." He looked at Eli. "Your mama was tracking something." The boy's eyes filled again. She said she was helping the lost ones. Maya's voice was barely a whisper. She was building her own map. Outside, thunder rolled close, shaking the tin roof. Reggie folded the paper, slid it back into the box. "We can't go to the cops with this. If that man's connected, we'd never see it again." "So what then?" Tone asked. "We make noise," Reggie said. "Big enough they can't bury it twice." He looked at Maya. "You still got that contact from the paper? The one that ran that piece on the shelter fire?" She nodded. "Yeah, she owed me a favor." "Call her," he said. "Tell her we've got something that's gonna wake this whole town." As Maya stepped aside with her phone, Eli tugged on Reggie's sleeve. "Will they come after us?" he asked. Reggie crouched. "Until they were eye level." "They'll try," he said honestly. "Bad people don't like the truth. But you ain't alone anymore, you hear? You got us now." Eli nodded, swallowing hard. Mama said, truth's a storm. It knocks things down so new things can grow. Reggie smiled, smart woman. The door rattled then. 3 short knocks that didn't belong to the wind. Tone was at the door in a second, hand hovering near the crowbar. We expecting anyone? He asked. Maya shook her head, phone still to her ear. Reggie signaled for silence. The knocks came again, softer this time, followed by a voice. It's Lisa from the Gazette, Maya called me. Relief loosened the air a little. Reggie opened the door just enough to see the reporter, soaked to the bone, clutching a camera case. She looked young, nervous but determined. You weren't kidding, she said, stepping inside. Half the precinct's on alert tonight. Something about outsiders stirring trouble. Maya shut the door behind her. Guess the storm's spreading. Reggie nodded toward the table. You wanted a story? Here it is. Lisa looked at the box, then at Eli. Whose is that? His mother's, Maya said. She died trying to tell what was happening. We're just finishing her work. Lisa swallowed hard, then pulled out her camera. Then, let's make sure it gets seen. They started scanning, photographing, documenting everything. Reggie watched her work, the rhythm of the shutter clicking like a heartbeat. Outside, the rain eased to a whisper, but the heaviness in the air stayed. When they were done, Lisa packed her gear. I'll send copies to 3 outlets tonight, she said. If something happens to me, they'll still go live. Reggie clasped her shoulder. Good. Don't let anyone silence it. She nodded and left, headlights cutting through the mist as her car disappeared down the road. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Tone said what they were all thinking. They're gonna come for that box. Reggie nodded. And we'll be ready. He looked down at Eli, whose small hand still clutched the folded map, now smudged and damp. You started this, little man. Now we ride for you and your mama both. Eli's eyes shone with something new. Fear, yes, but also pride. Then we ride, he said. Reggie stood, the thunder in his chest matching the one in the clouds. And when he started his engine, it didn't sound like metal. It sounded like a promise waking up. By dawn, the rain had thinned into a silver mist that clung to the world like smoke, and Rosewood Lane was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of silence that hummed under your skin and made you check the corners twice. Reggie hadn't slept. He'd stayed in the garage with the box locked inside a steel cabinet, the bikes lined like sentries against the wall. Every creak of the roof had sounded like footsteps to him, every gust of wind like a whisper meant for someone else. When the first hint of sunlight bled through the clouds, he stepped outside, coffee burning in his hand, and watched the horizon turn the color of rust. Maya came out behind him, her jacket half-zipped, exhaustion carved into her face. Lisa's story went live around 3, she said quietly. Front page online and mirrored on 3 blogs she trusts. Reggie nodded, eyes still on the road. They'll read it, he said. And the ones it's about will panic. You think she's safe? Maya asked. She's smart, he said. She'll stay moving. A rumble of engines rolled through the morning. Big Tone and 2 others returning from the night watch. They'd set at the edges of town. Tone cut his engine and climbed off, face grim. We got company, he said. Truck followed us from the highway. Same one. Reggie's jaw clenched. They getting bold. He turned toward the garage where Eli was standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes with a sleeve too long for his arms. The boy looked small and older all at once. You hungry, little man? Reggie asked. Eli nodded, though the tension in his shoulders didn't fade. I heard engines, he said, the bad kind. Not today, Reggie said. Today we decide how this ends. He crouched to Eli's height. You trust me? The boy hesitated, then nodded. Good, Reggie said. Then you stick close to Maya no matter what happens. We're gonna ride, but we're not running. We're showing this town that truth's got teeth. By the time the sun burned Through the last of the mist, the iron promise was ready. 50 bikes lined the lot, engines warming, chrome glinting under the pale light. The patch on every back read the same: Iron Promise, ride for the lost. Reggie swung onto his bike, the box strapped to his saddlebag, sealed again, but heavier now with meaning. He looked over at Maya, who sat with Eli behind her, the boy's small hands gripping the leather like it was faith itself. "We keep it tight," Reggie called out. "No one splits, no one stops. We head straight to the sheriff's office and we make them see. And if they don't," Tone asked, "then the world will." The engines roared as one, a sound that shook the dust from the rafters and turned heads for miles. The convoy rolled out of the lot in formation, a black river cutting through the waking town. People came out of houses, half-dressed, coffee mugs in hand, to watch the thunder pass. Some crossed themselves, others waved hesitantly, unsure whether they were witnessing trouble or salvation. Reggie led them down Jefferson, past the old mill, past the mural of Duke, painted on the brick wall where the club held their first rally years ago. The road opened into Main Street, where the courthouse and sheriff's office sat side by side like brothers who'd learned to smile for pictures but never shake hands. The bikers pulled up and parked in a single line, the sound of their engines dying into heavy silence. The sheriff, a broad man with sunburnt skin and eyes like winter, stepped out onto the steps, flanked by 2 deputies. "Morning, Reggie," he said, his voice careful. "To what do we owe this parade?" Reggie climbed off his bike, the box in his hands. "You read the news?" he asked. The sheriff's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You know I don't waste time on gossip. Then you'll want to look at this," Reggie said. He set the box on the hood of a cruiser and opened it. The sheriff's face stayed neutral until he saw the contents. Letters, photos, the little shoe. His jaw tightened. "Where'd you get that?" "Buried under a house on Rosewood," Reggie said. "Belonged to a woman named Clarissa Taylor. You remember her?" The sheriff didn't answer. Maya stepped forward, voice sharp. "Her boy remembers you." Eli peeked out from behind her, eyes locked on the man in the uniform. The sheriff's gaze flickered just for a second before settling into steel. "You folks are stirring up ghosts that need to stay buried." "Buried?" Reggie repeated. "That what you call it when a woman dies for telling the truth?" The deputies shifted uneasily, hands twitching near their belts. Tone moved closer, his shadow falling across the steps. The sheriff sighed. "You think bringing this circus here helps anyone? You're putting that boy in danger." Reggie leaned in, voice low but carrying. "He's already been in danger. The difference is now, you can't pretend not to see it." The standoff stretched, the crowd that had gathered whispering at the edges of the square. Then a voice cut through the murmurs. Lisa, the reporter, standing on the courthouse steps with her camera raised. "Smile for the front page," she called. The shutter clicked once, twice, and the sheriff flinched as if hit. "That's enough," he snapped. "This is over." "Not yet," Reggie said. He lifted one of the letters from the box and read aloud. "June 17th, met with C again. He says they're moving the children through old Route 9. They use the abandoned rest stop. I told him I couldn't keep quiet. He said I wouldn't have to." The words hung in the air like a verdict, the sheriff's face drained of color. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice cracked just enough for everyone to hear it. Lisa kept filming. Maya's voice was steady as stone. "We know exactly what we're talking about, and now so does everyone else." Phones came out of pockets, cameras flashed. The deputies exchanged glances, uncertain now, the weight of witness settling on them. Reggie closed the box and straightened. "You can arrest me if you want," he said. "But this box, this story, it's already gone. You can't bury it again." The sheriff's hand twitched toward his radio, then fell away. He turned, muttered something to the deputies, and disappeared inside. The bikers didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there as the morning swelled with the buzz of voices, the first sparks of outrage catching in the crowd. Eli looked up at Reggie. "Did we win?" he asked. Reggie smiled faintly, eyes still on the courthouse doors. "We started," he said. Behind them, the engines fired back to life, not as noise but as declaration, the kind that said the road had chosen a side. As they rolled away from the square, Maya glanced at the sky, where sunlight finally broke through the clouds. "Storm's lifting," she said. "For now," Reggie answered. "But storms don't end easy. They just move on to the next place that needs cleaning." And somewhere, deep in the courthouse, a door slammed hard enough to sound like the truth trying to get out. By the time the sun climbed fully over the courthouse roof, the story had already begun to spread like fire-jumping fences. Lisa's video hit the internet within the hour, shared across state. Lines picked up by small local outlets hungry for anything that smelled like scandal. By noon, the words "Rosewood Secrets" trended across social media, and strangers hundreds of miles away were demanding answers. Reggie sat in the diner at the edge of town, his jacket draped over the booth, watching the news on a flickering TV above the counter. The sound was low, but the captions told enough. Sheriff's office under investigation. Alleged cover-up involving missing children. His coffee had gone cold. Maya sat across from him, eyes red but steady. Eli, asleep on the bench beside her, his small hand still clutching the edge of her sleeve. Big Tone sat at the counter, his reflection ghosting in the chrome of the napkin holder, drumming a slow rhythm against his thigh. The waitress moved around them quietly, like she could feel the weight of what had been set in motion. "They'll come for us," Maya said finally. Reggie nodded. "Already are." He reached into his jacket and slid his phone across the table. On the screen were messages, unknown numbers, threats, warnings, promises that this would all go away if they just stopped. "They won't stop," she said. "Not until it's all out." "That's the plan," he said. He took a deep breath, the kind that feels like gravel on the way in. "We hold steady. The truth's got legs now. It can run on its own." The bell over the door jingled then, sharp against the quiet. A man walked in, mid-40s, plain clothes, eyes scanning like radar. He spotted Reggie immediately and froze. Reggie recognized him too. Detective Monroe, one of the few in the department who'd kept his head down but not dirty. The detective hesitated, then approached. "We need to talk," he said. Reggie didn't move. "You here as law or man?" Monroe's jaw tightened. "Man," he said. "Then sit." The detective slid into the booth, careful not to look at the sleeping boy. "You stirred up a hornet's nest," he said. "Half the department's been told to clean this up before it spreads." "Too late for that," Maya said. Monroe nodded. "I know. That's why I came. You don't know how deep this goes." Reggie leaned forward. "Then tell me." Monroe hesitated, then lowered his voice. Clarissa Taylor wasn't the first. She'd been helping another woman, Patricia Hensley, social worker. She disappeared 6 months before Clarissa died. Both of them were tracking reports of kids going missing from foster homes tied to the same private contractor. The company's run by a retired cop named Leland Price. Maya frowned. "The name on the list," she said. Monroe nodded. Price had friends everywhere. Judges, politicians, cops. He paid to keep people quiet. Clarissa must have found out. He was using the houses along Route 9 as holding points before moving the kids out of state. That's why she made the map. Reggie's hand clenched into a fist. "You saying the sheriff knew?" "Knew helped, profited, Monroe said. He's been covering for Price for years. Every time someone asked questions, he'd find a way to make it look like nothing. Maya glanced toward Eli. So Clarissa wrote it all down. Buried it to keep it safe. Monroe nodded again. She almost made it. There's one more name she mentioned in a letter she sent to a friend of mine. M.C. Never figured out who that was. But if the pattern's right, it's somebody high. He looked at Reggie. You've got to keep that box safe. If Price gets it, it's over. Reggie's voice was low even. It's safe. Monroe gave a thin smile. You mean until someone burns your garage down? Reggie's eyes lifted sharply. They wouldn't. But Monroe was already shaking his head. They already did. I heard the call come in 10 minutes ago. Reggie was on his feet before the words finished, his chair scraping hard against the floor. Maya jolted awake the boy, who blinked confused. What happened? He asked. Reggie grabbed his jacket. We gotta move. They spilled out into the street, engines roaring before questions could catch up. When they turned the corner onto Birch Avenue, the black plume was already visible, twisting into the sky like a scar. The iron. Promise garage was burning, flames chewing through metal and memory. Reggie pulled up hard, the heat slapping him as he jumped off his bike. The others arrived seconds later, a storm of panic and fury. The box, Maya shouted. It's not in there, Reggie said quickly. I moved it after we left the courthouse. Relief hit like air after drowning. Still, the fire was a message, a warning written in smoke. The firefighters arrived too late to save anything. Reggie stood watching, rain-mixed sweat dripping from his forehead, the reflection of the blaze painting his eyes orange. They're scared, Maya said beside him. Good. He shook his head. Scared men do stupid things. Eli clung to her leg, eyes wide at the sight of the inferno. Mama used to say fire's greedy, he whispered. Takes everything. Not everything, Maya said, crouching to meet his eyes. Some things it can't touch. Behind them, the rest of the iron promise began to gather, called by instinct more than message. Dozens of bikes lined the street, their riders, staring at the fire with the quiet fury of people who'd seen too much loss to be cowed by it. Big Tone walked up beside Reggie. What's the call, boss? Reggie looked at the burning wreck and felt the decision settle in his bones. We ride to Route 9, he said. Tonight. Maya blinked. Reggie, it's miles of forest and dirt. No lights, no backup. Then we'll bring our own, he said, voice flat as a blade. He turned to Eli. That's where the rest of your mama's map points, ain't it? The boy nodded, eyes wide and wet. She said that's where the bad men took the voices. Reggie's jaw tightened. Then that's where we're going. The flames lit their faces as they rolled out. 300 strong by midnight, a wave of thunder and conviction heading toward the black ribbon of Route 9. The night swallowed them whole as they rode, the engines of 300 bikes merging into one relentless hum that cut through the forest like a heartbeat too steady to die. The road too. Route 9 had long been abandoned. Cracked asphalt buried beneath creeping vines, signs rusted into ghosts of warnings no one remembered. Headlights stabbed through the darkness in white beams, slicing across pine trunks and mist that hung low like breath. Reggie led from the front, the wind clawing at his face, the weight of everything pressing against his shoulders. The fire, the boy, the box now strapped to his bike like an oath. Behind him, Maya rode close with Eli, holding tight, his small hands gripping the leather as if it were the last solid thing left in the world. Big Tone and the others fanned out behind, their vests flashing the silver wheel and roots. In every flash of light, no one spoke. They didn't need to. The road did the talking, the sound of tires against cracked pavement telling the story of men and women who refused to let the dark win quietly. They reached the turnoff around midnight, a narrow gravel path choked with weeds. Reggie slowed, lifted his hand, and the formation followed, engines dimming one by one until the forest swallowed the noise and only the ticking of cooling metal filled the air. The sky above them was moonless, a bowl of ink, and the only light came from the faint glow of their headlights, reflecting off the fog. "This is it," Reggie said, voice low. "The old rest stop's about half a mile in." Maya dismounted, helping Eli down. "He shouldn't be here," she whispered. Reggie looked at the boy, who stared back at him with eyes too old for 9 years. "He's already here," Reggie said quietly. "He's the reason we're all standing." They moved forward on foot, flashlights cutting trembling paths through the underbrush. The air was thick, wet, carrying the scent of earth and rot and something else, something chemical, faint but wrong. The path narrowed between two leaning oaks before opening into a clearing where the remains of the rest stop waited like a memory left to decay. The building was small, squat, its roof caved on one side, the sign half fallen, "Rest Easy Cafe." The parking lot was a patchwork of moss and dirt. Someone had been here recently, tire tracks etched deep into the mud, cigarette butts fresh enough to shine. Reggie's stomach tightened. "Lights off," he said, motioning with 2 fingers. The bikers killed their beams one by one until the clearing was dark. Only the faint silver of the stars filtered through the trees. Then, from somewhere beyond the building, came a sound, a low hum that wasn't the forest, mechanical and rhythmic. They froze. Reggie crouched, motioning Maya to stay with Eli. He crept forward, careful, boots silent against the wet ground. As he neared the corner of the building, the hum grew clearer, joined by the metallic clank of chains and the scrape of shovels. He risked a glance. In the clearing behind the cafe, 2 men stood beside a pickup, one holding a flashlight, the other digging near what looked like an old storm drain. A third man leaned against the truck, smoking, his arm bare where a compass tattoo glowed pale in the beam of light. Reggie's pulse jumped. He signaled back to Tone, 3 fingers up, then drew the small knife from his belt. The bikers fanned out silently, forming a half circle around the clearing. Maya crouched with Eli under the collapsed roof, whispering prayers she didn't realize she remembered. The boy's breathing was shallow, fast. "That's him," he whispered. "That's the man." Reggie waited for the right moment, the hum of the generator covering their movements. The man with the tattoo bent down to check the hole they'd been digging. Reggie saw something glint in the dirt metal, maybe a container, and then the man laughed, a harsh sound that cracked the air. "Told you she didn't hide it all," he said. "Price'll be pleased." The words snapped something inside Reggie. He stepped into the open, voice carrying across the clearing like thunder. "Don't move!" The 3 men spun, flashlights swinging wild. "What the?" The rest of the iron promise appeared behind him, shadows turning into forms, leather and steel, gleaming in the faint light. "You don't want to do this," the tattooed man said, his hand inching toward his hip. "You don't want to lie to me," Reggie replied. "That hole looks like the kind folks dig for the truth." The man sneered. "You got no idea who you're dealing with." Reggie took a step closer. "I do now." The tension stretched, thin as wire. Then the man lunged for his gun, but he never made it. Big Tone moved like a storm, knocking him to the ground with a single blow. The flashlight flew from his hand, landing near the pit, and for the first time, they all saw what was inside. It wasn't a box or a stash. It was a small wooden crate, half rotted, with the corner of a doll's dress caught in the lid. The air seemed to stop moving. Maya gasped, her hand over her mouth. Reggie knelt, hands trembling as he brushed the dirt away and lifted the lid. Inside were bones, small, fragile, wrapped in the remains of fabric that had once been pink. A bracelet dangled from one wrist, the kind sold in toy aisles. Eli made a sound between a sob and a scream, collapsing against Maya's chest. The biker stood frozen, every breath a tremor. The man on the ground started to laugh, the sound raw and cracked. "You think you're heroes?" he rasped. "You don't even know how many there are." Reggie's hand tightened around his knife, but he didn't move. Maya's voice came sharp. "How many?" The man grinned, teeth flashing in the dark. Too late to count. Then, in the distance, sirens. The flashing blue washed through the trees, growing closer fast. Reggie looked up, fury twisting into something colder. "They called them in," he said. "They want to bury this again." He turned to the others. "Grab everything. Pictures, GPS coordinates, proof." Big Tone and the crew moved fast, snapping photos, scooping dirt samples, marking the ground. Reggie closed the crate gently, his hand lingering on it like a vow. "We're not leaving them here," he said. "Not again." The sirens were almost on top of them now, engines snarling behind the trees. Maya pulled Eli toward the bikes. "Reggie," she shouted. He didn't look back. "Go," he yelled. "Get the boy out." Tires skidded. Somewhere beyond the trees, the men in the clearing scrambled, one clutching his side, the other bolting for the woods. Reggie turned and ran for his bike, the box still strapped to the back. Engines roared to life again, headlights slicing through the dark. The first police cruisers broke into the clearing, just as the convoy surged onto the road, mud flying from their tires. The bikers didn't look back. They rode like fire, the forest alive behind them with shouts and flashing lights. The truth they'd unearthed, burning hotter than the chase itself. The road twisted through the woods like a vein of shadow, narrow and slick, the rain returning in bursts that turned the pavement to glass. Reggie's eyes burned from the glare of headlights, bouncing off his mirrors, blue and red flashes streaking through the trees behind them like lightning that had lost its mind. The sheriff's cruisers were close, too close, and every second they stayed on Route 9, tightened the noose. He pushed the throttle harder, the engine roaring beneath him like an angry heart, and shouted over his shoulder to Big Tone, "Split him up, 2 groups, keep moving." The formation broke like water around stone, half the bikers veering left down an old service road, the rest following Reggie north. Maya was with him, Eli clinging to her waist, his eyes wide, his breath fogging the visor of a helmet. "We can't outrun them forever," she yelled. "We don't need to outrun them," Reggie shouted back. "We just need daylight." The forest blurred into a tunnel of motion, trees flashing by in streaks of green and black. Mud splattered their boots, gravel spat from under tires, engines howled. Behind them, sirens wailed, then broke apart, the cruisers splitting to chase both groups. Reggie cut across an old logging bridge that creaked beneath the weight of his bike. Halfway over, the boards shifted, one giving way with a crack. His front tire lifted for half a heartbeat, the world narrowing into that terrible moment between balance and fall. Then Big Tone's hand shot out from behind, steadying the back of the bike just enough for Reggie to land hard on the other side. He didn't look back, just raised a hand in thanks and kept going. The rain came harder, hammering the world into blur. They rode until the trees broke open into a field dotted with abandoned trailers, the kind people forgot existed. Reggie slowed, pulling into the first one with a collapsed porch. The others followed, engines dying one by one, until the only sound left was the hiss of cooling metal and the rain whispering against tin roofs. Eli was shaking, soaked and pale. Maya pulled off her helmet and lifted him into her arms, wrapping him in her jacket. Reggie wiped his face with his sleeve and turned to Tone. "We lost them?" Tone nodded, breathing hard, for now. Reggie nodded once, then crouched beside his bike, unstrapping the metal box and setting it on the porch. It was dented from the ride, but intact. "They'll keep coming," Maya said. "They won't stop till they've got this back." Reggie looked at her, then at Eli. "Then we don't let them." He opened the box again, pulling out the papers, the photos, the list. The ink had bled in spots from the damp air, but the words were still readable. He spread them out on the porch like cards in a game that had no winner. "We've got names, dates, proof," he said. "Lisa's story started the fire. This is the fuel." Maya rubbed Eli's hair. "And what if they burn everything before anyone can see it?" Reggie looked out into the rain, jaw set. "Then we make sure the whole world's watching." Tone frowned. "How?" Reggie's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the clouds glowed faintly with the first hint of dawn. "We take it to the capital," he said. "Direct. Straight to the Attorney General's office. They can't bury it there." Maya blinked. "That's 100 miles. Then we better start early." He began folding the papers carefully, sealing them in a plastic bag, then wrapped it in a rag and slid it back into the box. "We ride at sunrise, split formation again, half guard, half lead. We make noise all the way." Big Tone nodded. "And the boy?" Reggie looked at Eli, who had stopped trembling and was watching him with that fierce quiet. That always made him forget the kid was only 9. "He rides with me," Reggie said. "He's earned that much." The boy's eyes widened. "Really?" Reggie smiled faintly. "You're the one who found the map. You finished the ride." For the first time in days, Eli smiled back. A small, uncertain curve that looked too much like his mother's. They rested for an hour, huddled in the dry space of the trailer, listening to the storm move on. The dawn came slow, filtered through fog, painting everything in a ghostly silver. When the first light hit the wet grass, Reggie kicked his bike to life. The others followed, the air filling again with the low rumble that meant purpose. Eli climbed up behind him, small hands gripping tight around Reggie's waist. Maya rode on his left, Tone on his right, the others falling into line behind. "Ready?" Reggie called. "Let's finish what she started." The engines roared as one. They rolled out onto the open road, the sun breaking through the clouds in shards of gold that turned the wet asphalt into a mirror. Ahead lay 100 miles of danger, but behind them rode something stronger: proof, faith, and the memory of a woman who had refused to stay silent. They rode through towns that hadn't seen that many bikes since the war, through crossroads where people stepped out of gas stations to stare, cameras rising as the convoy thundered past. The story had spread faster than the chase. Everywhere they went, phones flashed, social feeds filled, the hashtag "the boy with the map" rising like wildfire. At every overpass, people waved signs: "Ride for Clarissa, ride for the lost, truth rolls on." Maya looked over at Reggie, who kept his eyes on the horizon, a faint smile breaking through the grit. "She'd be proud," she said. He nodded. "She's leading us." When they hit the capital's outer ring, police cars blocked the highway ahead, lights flashing blue against the morning sky. But this time, the bikers didn't slow. Behind them, the roar of engines had grown. Riders from other chapters, strangers who'd seen the story online, had joined the ride. By the time they reached the blockade, there were more than 500 bikes stretching back as far as the eye could see. The police officers hesitated, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of it. Reggie pulled up front, raised his hand, and cut his engine. The others followed, silence rolling across the highway like a wave. He climbed off his bike, the box in his hands, and started walking toward the line of officers. One stepped forward. "Sir, you can't." Reggie opened the box, lifted the plastic bag, and held it up. "You're gonna want to hear this," he said. Cameras clicked. Drones hovered overhead. Reporters shouted questions. And right there on the asphalt, with the world watching live, Reggie told the story of a little boy's map, a mother's bravery, and the secret buried under a house on Rosewood Lane. Every word landed like a drumbeat, steady and undeniable. By the time he was done, the crowd was silent, the truth too big to ignore. Eli stood beside him, small and unshaken, holding his mother's locket. "She told me to find people who don't scare easy," he said into the microphone a reporter handed him. "I found them." The crowd erupted, applause and tears mixing into the roar of engines that started again, louder this time, rolling over the sound of sirens and politics and fear. The truth was out now, and the road had carried it all the way home. The courthouse in the capital looked nothing like the one back in Rosewood. Its marble steps gleamed under the noon sun, banners fluttering where old flags hung heavy, and the air around. It buzzed with cameras, reporters, and the hum of people who'd come not to watch, but to witness. Reggie stood at the top of those steps, the box resting on the podium before him, Eli by his side, Maya and Big Tone flanking them like anchors. Behind them, the line of bikers stretched down the avenue, a river of leather and chrome that shimmered like a living monument. The sound of engines idling low was the heartbeat of the day, a steady reminder that this wasn't about spectacle, it was about promise. The Attorney General herself had come, out, flanked by aides and state troopers, the weight of politics and conscience warring in her eyes. "Mr. Coleman," she said, "you've caused quite a stir." Reggie met her gaze without flinching. "Wasn't my plan to cause anything. Just thought it was time somebody listened." He opened the box, laid out the letters, the list, the photos. The crowd leaned in, phones raised, recording every motion. "These came from under the house of a woman named Clarissa Taylor," he said, voice carrying through the microphones. "She was a mother, a whistleblower, a truth teller, and she was murdered for it. Her son brought us a map and we followed it. What we found under her home wasn't treasure, it was proof." The Attorney General reached forward, gloved hands trembling slightly as she lifted one of the letters. Her eyes scanned the words, then widened. "These names," she began. Reggie nodded. "Judges, officers, contractors, people who've been using this state's children like a business." A murmur rippled through the crowd, anger, disbelief, then a rising tide of fury. Reggie turned slightly, gesturing to the boy beside him. "This is Eli Taylor," he said. "He's 9 years old. He watched his mother die for trying to protect other kids. He carried her map all the way to us. He's the reason this came to light. He's the reason we're all standing here." Eli clutched his mother's locket, the metal glinting against his chest, and looked out at the sea of faces below. The microphone hissed, softly as he leaned toward it. "Mama said, the road remembers," he whispered, his small voice trembling but sure. "Now everybody else does too." The applause began like a spark, and then erupted, people shouting his name, chanting, "Ride for Clarissa, ride for the lost, ride for the truth." Reporters surged forward, flashes blinding, questions flying. Reggie stepped back, letting the noise rise, watching the tide shift from despair to action. The Attorney General straightened, eyes sharp now, voice cutting through the din. "Effective immediately," she said, "the state is launching an independent investigation into the Rosewood Sheriff's Department and the Route 9 operations. Every name in these documents will be verified. Every child unaccounted for will be found. That's my word. The crowd roared again, but behind the celebration, Reggie felt something quieter, relief mixed with the ache of all they'd lost to get here. Maya leaned close, her voice low. You did it. Reggie shook his head. We did it, and she did it first. He looked at Eli. She's still leading us. That afternoon turned into a blur of interviews, meetings, and signatures. The bikers stayed close, guarding the box as if it were holy, the crowd treating them not as outlaws, but as the shepherds of a story that had nearly died in silence. By evening, the sun dipped behind the courthouse, painting everything in gold and fire. The street had emptied, except for the iron promise. Reggie sat on the steps, watching Eli trace patterns in the marble with a stick. You ready to go home, little man? He asked. Eli looked up. Home's gone. Reggie nodded slowly. Then we'll build you a new one. The boy smiled faintly. With a garden? Reggie chuckled. With a garden. Maya walked up, holding 2 cups of coffee. They want you on the news tonight, she said. Said you're a hero. Reggie took a cup, shaking his head. Heroes don't get tired this easy. Maya smiled. Then call it something else. Call it faith. They sat there in the fading light, the noise of the day slipping away until only the soft rumble of engines remained. Big Tone was checking the bikes, others standing guard, their silhouettes sharp against the sunset. Eli leaned against Reggie's arm, heavy with sleep. Mama used to say, when the truth comes out, the air feels lighter, he murmured. Reggie smiled. She was right. A breeze rolled through the avenue, carrying the faint scent of rain and magnolia, and for a moment everything felt still, like the world had exhaled. Later, when they rode back toward Rosewood, the night air wrapped around them cool and alive. The stars came out one by one, and the highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of silver leading home. As they crossed the bridge into town, people waited on the sidewalks, waving candles and flags, cheering as the convoy passed. The iron promise slowed, engines rumbling low in respect. At the edge of Rosewood Lane, Reggie stopped and turned off his bike. The others followed, the silence deep and reverent. Eli climbed down, walked to the yard where the map had begun, and knelt by the no-grass patch that now bloomed with wildflowers planted by neighbors. He placed his mother's locket on the soil and whispered, "We found it, Mama." The road remembered. Reggie watched him, the weight in his chest softening into something like peace. The engine started again, their sound rising slow and steady, echoing across the town that had finally opened its eyes. And as they rode off into the night, taillights glowing red against the dark, the story of a little boy's map and a mother's truth became part of the road's memory, etched deep, alive, and unforgettable. By the time the iron promise rolled back into Rosewood for good, the town had already begun to change. The old sheriff was gone, taken away in the middle of the night by state investigators, who spoke in clipped tones and didn't meet anyone's eyes. The crooked deputies resigned one by one, some disappearing before the papers could print their names. The house on Rosewood Lane, once the shadow at the edge of town, had become something else entirely. Reggie and Maya bought it with the donations that flooded in from strangers who'd followed the story. Online people who said they'd never met Clarissa Taylor but owed her their faith back. The bikers worked all through the spring, tearing out the rotted boards, replacing every nail, every window. They painted it blue again, the same shade Eli remembered. And in the yard, where the no-grass patch used to choke the earth, they planted a small garden. Wildflowers, vegetables, a tree in the center, a young magnolia that would one day tower over the roof. Eli called it Mama's tree. The house became the headquarters for the Roadkeepers Foundation, a place where volunteers could come to feed, shelter, and protect children slipping through the cracks. Every morning, bikers parked their bikes outside, helmets gleaming, the air full of laughter and the smell of breakfast. Inside, the walls held framed photos, Clarissa smiling, Duke from the old days, and a picture of Reggie and Eli standing in front of the Capitol building, the box between them like a relic of truth. The first week, the shelter opened. A woman came to the door holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes were hollow with fear, but when she saw Maya, she started to cry. "They said this was a safe place," she whispered. Maya just opened her arms. "It is." Word spread, as it always does when the world is desperate for something good. Within months, the house on Rosewood Lane wasn't just a symbol, it was a sanctuary. The Iron Promise became more than a biker brotherhood. They were protectors, mentors, guardians of the lost. They patrolled the roads at night, checking on foster homes, bringing food to shelters, escorting women and children who had nowhere else to turn. The road itself became their church, the sound of their engines, their hymn. And Eli, still small but stronger every day, grew up in the heart of it all. He learned to fix engines under Big Tone's patient hand, to read maps from Reggie, to tell stories from Maya. But more than anything, he learned that the road never forgets. He'd stand by the magnolia tree sometimes, watching the wind move through its new leaves, and whisper, "We did it, Mama." Every spring they held a ride in Clarissa's name, the Ride for the Lost. Hundreds came from every state, filling Rosewood with the thunder of engines and the smell of freedom. They rode past the courthouse, past the diner, past the new mural painted downtown. Clarissa's face rising from a swirl of roots and roads, her eyes bright with defiance. Below it were the words she'd written once in a letter they found in the box: "The truth may hide, but it does not die." On the 5th anniversary of that first ride, Eli stood at the head of the convoy beside Reggie. The boy was 14 now, taller, his curls brushing his shoulders, his eyes steady. He wore a leather vest of his own, the Iron Promise patch stitched proudly on the back. Reggie looked at him, the pride in his chest almost painful. "You ready, little man?" he asked. Eli smiled. "Always." They started the engines, the sound rolling down the street like thunder remembering itself. The town cheered as they passed, candles and flags in every hand. They stopped at the edge of the woods where Route 9 began, the same place where the darkness had once swallowed them whole. Now, in daylight, it looked smaller, powerless. Reggie dismounted, pulled a small wooden cross from his saddlebag, and planted it near the tree line. It bore no name, just a simple engraving, "For the ones still missing." Eli knelt beside it, resting his hand on the wood. "We'll find them too," he whispered. Maya placed a hand on his shoulder. "You already started, baby." The wind moved through the magnolia branches. Overhead, carrying the scent of flowers and asphalt, of life and the road. As they turned to leave, Reggie looked back one last time at the highway stretching away, endless and alive. "You think she'd be proud?" he asked softly. Maya smiled. "She already told you." He frowned. "When?" "Every time the road calls your name." Reggie laughed quietly, shaking his head. "Guess I better keep answering then." That night, when the last of the bikers left and Rosewood was quiet again, the magnolia tree stood glowing in the moonlight, its roots deep in the earth where once nothing grew. And under the stars, the faint hum of engines echoed from far away, as if the road itself were whispering the story back of a boy with a map, a mother who refused to be silenced, and the riders who carried her truth until the whole world could hear it. The sun rose over Rosewood 1 year later, soft and gold, spilling over the magnolia tree that now towered above the yard of the house once wrapped in shadows. Dew clung to its leaves like small pearls, and the road outside hummed faintly as engines approached from far away. It had been 12 months since the iron promise had carried Clarissa Taylor's truth to the capital. 12 months since Eli stood on those marble steps holding his mother's locket as the whole world listened. In that time, the story had grown roots across states, birthing new chapters of riders, shelters, and safe houses that all carried the same insignia. A wheel wrapped in roots and the words, "The road remembers." The house on Rosewood Lane had become something close to sacred ground. That morning it was alive with movement. Banners fluttered from the porch, reading "Ride for the Lost," and truth rolls on. Neighbors, riders, journalists, and children who'd once been rescued by the foundation crowded the yard. The air smelled of barbecue, gasoline, and magnolia blossoms, an odd but perfect mix of grit and grace. Reggie stood by his bike, older, the gray in his beard now silver, his leather vest worn soft from miles of road. He watched as riders from every corner of the country rolled into town, their engines low and steady, the sound more like a heartbeat than thunder. Maya stood at his side, clipboard in hand, trying to keep order in the beautiful chaos. Big Tone was at the grill, laughing loud enough to carry over the noise, flipping burgers like it was his calling. And near the magnolia tree stood Eli, 16 now, tall and quiet, the sunlight catching in his hair. He wore a new vest, his own patch. Stitched proudly across the back, "Iron Promise, Rosewood, Chapter Captain." He was no longer the small boy clutching a crumpled grocery bag map. He was a young man now, eyes sharp, steady, and carrying that same spark that had once driven his mother to uncover the truth. The crowd gathered as noon approached, hundreds of riders lined up along the lane, bikes gleaming in the sunlight. The town had declared it a holiday, Clarissa Taylor Day. The mayor had come, the attorney general had sent flowers, and Lisa, the journalist who'd risked her career to tell the story, was there again, her camera slung over her shoulder, but her eyes soft with pride. Reggie took the small wooden stage they'd built in front of the magnolia tree. He looked out at the sea of faces, the glint of sunlight on chrome, the banners waving like gentle flames. A year ago, he began, voice low but steady. We followed a map drawn by a boy, brave enough to face the dark. What we found changed more than a town. It changed us. It reminded us that the road don't just take you places, it brings you back to what matters. He turned slightly, gesturing to Eli, and the one who started it all is standing right here. He drew a map that led to his mother's truth. Today, he's leading us again. Eli stepped forward, nerves flickering behind his calm. The crowd quieted. He looked down at the ground for a moment, then back up at the faces watching him. Mama used to say that when people forget, the earth remembers, he said, his voice carrying with surprising strength. This tree is proof. We planted it over the place where nothing used to grow. Now it blooms every spring. Just like the truth, it might sleep for a while, but it wakes up again when the time's right. The crowd erupted into applause, cheers, and the low chorus of engines revving in approval. Eli lifted his mother's locket high. This ride is for her, for every child who never got to come home, and for the ones still waiting to be found. The engines thundered again, and the sound rolled over the fields like a living wave. Reggie grinned, pride softening the lines on his face. "Let's ride," he shouted, and the crowd roared back as 300 bikes came to life in a single heartbeat. The procession rolled out of Rosewood, sunlight flashing off. Their chrome, the magnolia tree shadow stretching long behind them. They rode through the heart of town, where shopkeepers stood in their doorways holding flags and children waved from porches. They passed the mural downtown, Clarissa's face rising from the road, her eyes bright and defiant, roots twisting into the shape of a map. At the base of it, fresh flowers lay piled in tribute, and someone had painted new words below the old, "The road never forgets." The convoy wound through back roads, past the old diner where Reggie and Maya first met Eli, past the courthouse that had once turned its eyes away. People lined the streets, cheering, crying, holding signs with the names of lost loved ones. Some ran forward to touch the passing bikes, as if the touch itself could draw courage from their engines. At the edge of town, they reached the overlook that looked down on Route 9. The forest that once hid the rest stop had been cleared by state crews months ago. The ground turned into a memorial park with plaques bearing names reclaimed from Clarissa's list. The wind carried the hum of the engines over the trees, and for a moment the world felt quiet, sacred. Reggie stopped his bike and looked at Eli. "You know what to do," he said. Eli nodded, climbed off, and walked to the largest plaque, his. Boots crunching on the gravel, he placed the locket there, fingers lingering. "She said truth was a storm," he whispered. Guess she was right. The crowd fell silent as he turned back, and then, slowly, every biker lifted their hand, fists to their hearts, a salute of respect. The engines quieted until only the sound of wind through the trees remained. Maya wiped her eyes. Big Tone cleared his throat and said gruffly, "Ain't no one ever gone that's remembered this loud." Laughter rippled through the sadness, easing the heaviness without breaking it. When they rode back down the hill, the sun was beginning to set, staining the sky with colors too fierce to name. Back in Rosewood, lanterns had been strung across the magnolia branches, glowing like captured stars. Music played, people danced, kids laughed. The night turned warm, alive. Reggie stood beside Maya, watching Eli laugh with the other young riders. The weight of the world finally lifted off his shoulders. "You ever think about Duke?" Maya asked quietly. Reggie smiled. "Every ride." "He'd be proud." Reggie nodded. "He's somewhere out there on the wind, smiling that crooked smile." He looked at the horizon, where the road disappeared into darkness. "Funny thing about the road," he said, "it never ends. It just waits for the next story to roll across it." Maya took his hand, squeezing. "Then let's keep giving it something worth remembering." The engine started again, soft this time, not as thunder, but as heartbeat, carrying into the night as the magnolia's leaves whispered above them. And somewhere in that sound, deep, steady, endless, was the voice of a mother and the courage of a boy whose map had led the world home. Years passed, but the road never lost its hum. The magnolia tree by the house on Rosewood Lane had grown tall enough to cast shade across the roof, its roots spreading deep where fear once lived, its blossoms painting the air white every spring. Eli was 22 now, his shoulders broader, his voice steady like the engines he grew up around. The house had changed too. What was once a shelter had become the headquarters of the Roadkeepers Foundation, with maps and photos pinned on every wall, tracking every child found and every family restored. The movement that started with one boy's shaky pencil lines had become a living network across the country. Riders carried food, safety, hope, and truth along highways like veins, and the emblem of the wheel and roots had become a quiet promise known from Texas to Tennessee. Reggie still rode beside him, though his beard was more gray than black. Now, and he'd started letting Eli take point on the big rides. "About time," Reggie said. Whenever someone teased him about slowing down, "He's got her eyes, I just got miles." It was late one summer night when Eli found the new map. He hadn't meant to. He'd been sorting through his mother's things in the attic, organizing the boxes they kept for anniversaries and fundraisers. The smell of old paper and dust wrapped around him, warm and bittersweet. In one corner of a weathered box, folded so tightly it looked like a scrap of forgotten brown paper, lay the grocery bag map, the original one, edges soft, pencil lines faded, but still visible. He hadn't opened it in years. Carefully, he unfolded it, tracing the crooked path that had changed everything: the mailbox, the pecan tree, the porch, the 3 X's. He smiled faintly, remembering how his hand had trembled when he'd drawn them. But something caught his eye now that he hadn't seen before. A tiny mark near the edge of the paper, faint, almost rubbed away, a small circle around. A dot with a line drawn through it. It wasn't one of his marks. The lines were too smooth, too neat. He frowned, turning the map toward the light, and saw faint writing beside it, in his mother's delicate script, "For when you're ready." His heart stumbled. He turned the paper over, and there it was, another map, smaller, drawn over the years, old creases, the lines faint, but sure, leading away from Rosewood and into the next county. It ended with one word, printed carefully in her handwriting: safe. Eli sat there for a long time, the cicadas loud outside, the smell of rain drifting through the open window. Then he called Reggie. Within the hour, the bikes were ready, engines idling low in the moonlight. Maya came too, her hair now streaked with gray, but her eyes bright as ever. Big Tone rolled up with a toolbox strapped to the back of his bike, grinning. "You find a new mystery, kid?" Eli held up the folded paper. "Looks like Mama left us one more ride." They left before dawn, the air cool, the road stretching ahead like memory. The map led them south along the river, then east past old mills and ghost towns. Every landmark matched a note, scribbled faintly in the margin: the willow by the water, the church without bells, the road that hums. Hours later, they reached the end, a cluster of small houses at the edge of an open field. A sign swinging from a post, St. Mercy's Haven. It was a children's home, bright, clean, laughter spilling through the open windows. A woman stepped out to greet them, her hair silver, her smile tired but kind. "Can I help you?" she asked. Eli stepped forward, his heart beating faster. "My name's Eli Taylor," he said. "My mother was Clarissa Taylor." The woman's eyes softened. "Oh," she whispered, "you're her boy." She motioned for them to follow. Inside, the halls were lined with photos, children of all ages, smiling, holding certificates, planting gardens. The woman pointed to one wall. "Your mother sent us names years ago," she said. "Said if anything happened to her, we should keep the children safe. She didn't want them lost again. We've been here ever since." Eli's throat tightened. "She saved them?" "Some of them," the woman said gently, "and you saved the rest." In the corner, a young woman with dark curls and eyes like Eli's looked up from a book. She couldn't have been more than a few years younger than him. "You're Eli?" she asked softly. He nodded, stunned. "How did you?" "Clarissa's letter said you might come one day," she said, smiling. "She called me Leela, said you were my brother." The room tilted, time folding in on itself. He remembered a small red shoe, a ribbon in a box, a name whispered through tears. He'd thought she was gone forever. Now she was standing in front of him. They embraced, wordless, the years between them collapsing into one long heartbeat. Reggie turned away, clearing his throat, pretending to study a nearby painting. Maya blinked hard, wiping her eyes. Big Tone muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting light through the open door. Eli stepped into it with his sister beside him, the map in his hand, his mother's words echoing in his head. "For when you're ready." He looked at Reggie, who grinned. "Guess she knew you'd find her." "Guess she always knew," Eli said. They rode back that afternoon slower than usual, taking in every curve, every mile. Lila rode pillion behind Eli, her laughter carried on the wind. When they reached Rosewood, the town was waiting, people cheering, waving flags, shouting their names. Reggie leaned close as they slowed near the magnolia tree. "So what now?" he asked. Eli smiled, looking down at the map folded in his hand. "Now we draw another one." That night, under the magnolia's blossoms, Eli pinned the map to the wall inside the house beside all the others. Above it he wrote, "The Lost Found Home," and somewhere deep in the summer air, carried on the sound of distant engines, he could almost hear his mother's voice whispering, proud and soft, "The road never ends, son. It just changes hands." The summer air in Rosewood was thick with the smell of magnolia and gasoline. The morning Eli finished pinning the new map to the wall, the edges fluttering slightly in the soft wind that came. Through the open window, the house was quiet for once. The chatter of volunteers had faded into the yard, where the bikes waited, gleaming under the rising sun. He stood there for a long moment, studying the crooked lines and circles that stretched out from Rosewood across the country. Each line meant something now. Each stop a shelter, each circle a family, each new mark a promise kept. Behind him the stairs creaked and Reggie's slow tread filled the hall. "You still staring at that paper, boy?" Reggie asked, his voice warm with amusement. Eli turned, grinning. "Just thinking how one map started all this." Reggie leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "Started a lot of things, saved a few souls, too." He walked closer, eyes running over the wall, covered in roots and photos, the living history of their miles. "You ready to take over?" Eli blinked. "Take over what?" "The road," Reggie said simply. "The foundation, the promise. I'm getting too old to lead all these engines, and you've been steering us anyway." Eli shook his head. "You can't just stop riding." Reggie chuckled. "Didn't say I'd stop. I'll still be out there, just not up front. Every road needs a new captain now and then." The silence between them was easy, filled with the hum of the morning. Eli looked back at the map, tracing the lines with his finger. "I used to think the road ended at the capital," he said. "That once we told the truth, that was it. But Mama was right. The road don't end. It just keeps going, carrying whoever's strong enough to keep it alive." Reggie nodded, his eyes soft. "Then it's yours now. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Don't ever let it go quiet." Eli smiled, the same half smile Clarissa used to wear when she was about to change someone's mind. "I won't." Outside, the rest of the Iron Promise was gathering for another ride. Maya stood near her bike, her braids streaked silver now, laughing with Big Tone, who wore the years like armor. The younger riders, some who had been children at the shelter, some new faces drawn by the legend of the boy and his map, were checking their engines, tightening straps, the air buzzing with anticipation. Eli stepped out onto the porch, the sun catching the chrome of the bikes until it was blinding. He slipped on his helmet, the same one Reggie had given him years ago, the inside rim marked with the words, "Ride for the Lost." He climbed onto his bike, Lila settling behind him, her hands steady on his shoulders. Reggie started his engine, the deep growl rolling. Through the quiet street, and the others followed one by one until the sound swelled into a chorus that shook the morning. Eli looked around at them. Dozens of riders, young and old, every color, every story stitched into their jackets, and felt the weight of it settle, not like a burden, but like belonging. He raised his hand, and the noise faded until only the faint rumble remained. "This one's for her," he called out, voice carrying over the wind, "for every name on every wall, for every road that remembers." The engines answered, one unified roar that seemed to rise from the earth itself. They rolled out together, the convoy stretching down the highway until it looked like a living vein of light moving through the world. The wind caught the edge of Eli's vest and lifted it just enough for the patch to shine. The wheel, the roots, and the words. The road never ends. The fields blurred by, the magnolia trees swayed, and the horizon opened ahead, endless and bright. Reggie fell in beside him, the two of them riding wheel to wheel, the old guard and the new, the beginning and the continuation. "Feels good up here, don't it?" Reggie shouted over the wind. Eli laughed. "Feels like home." They rode until the sun was high and the world shimmered with heat, then farther still, because that's what riders do when the road keeps calling. And somewhere behind them, in the quiet house on Rosewood Lane, the magnolia's leaves rustled in the breeze, and the map on the wall shifted slightly as if the paper itself remembered the sound of engines. The story of a little boy's map had come full circle, but the road was still out there, waiting for the next whisper, the next secret, the next brave soul to follow it. As the convoy disappeared into the light, the closing voice of rooted voices, US would carry through the screen like a prayer and a promise. Some maps lead to gold, others to truth, but the bravest ones lead you home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and stay with us, because there are still miles left to ride and stories the road hasn't told yet. And then only the hum remained, fading into the horizon, steady as faith, endless as the highway itself.